Well, today I want to go over a section from my most recent book, pamphlet, whatever you want to call it. It felt like a book writing it. It's 85 pages. Now, I think that's an ideal length for a book. You can call it whatever you want, book, pamphlet, PDF, whatever, but from the business bottleneck. Now, this section was just a little section on, it's kind of like a mindset, like I talk about all the time, but it's basically about using urgency and enshrining urgency. Now, long ago, in internet terms, there was this book called like A Sense of Urgency or something, and there's a few follow-on books, and it's basically the same part, but this is kind of a summary of it. Is that when you're going through that whole process that I'm always talking about, your digital transformation, making your software process better, developing and product managing software. So eventually you can get to the part where you can make the way that you do your business better, be more agile and innovative, be all like tech company. I love to summarize that thing. But oftentimes it's hard to motivate people to do things. And I think also the fact that you want to transform shows that you've had some slackness in your sense of urgency and your sense to always be improving and doing things. And it's a hard thing to get into your culture and to your way of thinking, the norms of your organization, to always be striving to do things better, to be striving to learn what should be done better and what could be done better. It's hard to really get that installed and going. That's why people talk about it all the time, and there's endless airport business books about it. But that is something to consider when you're launching this digital transformation initiative, whatever it is you're trying to do, getting better at software, and that is building up and then maintaining this sense of urgency. Now that sounds kind of scary, but it's just one way of saying that, like, we've got to move and we've got to do this, and we can't just rest on our laurels, as they were saying, and kind of be happy with what we have. And now, when I wrote this section, there was some good survey stuff that basically, I forget which survey this is from, but it's a way of, as with all sort of survey numbers that I use, it's a way of illustrating an intuitive point that I think everyone agrees with and knows. And that is that, everyone is concerned about innovating and doing disruptive things, right? Like the board on down is always pounding that we need to be better and be more like a tech company. But then when you also compare that to initiatives that people are funding and having in place, it tends to be misaligned, right? They're funding different things, or even if they're funding new ways of changing the way that they're functioning, or spending time coming up with new business models, it's a smaller amount of the attention and the spend than you would expect for that importance. And to be fair, you do spend a huge amount, most amount of your time and money on your existing businesses, that existing revenue, which you can't really just sort of start ignoring. So you've got to figure out that split. You can use your Petro thing of 80-20 or 70-30, whatever you want. Just come up with that actually works instead of choosing some arbitrary round numbers that are nice. But I think a bit of what this shows is that sense of urgency of we actually need to get out there and we've got to move on this. We can't just sit around in our analysis paralysis and think about the strategy. We can't just sort of go at the same pace that we were going. We've got to actually change how we're functioning. And, when we were starting out on this current round of like, you IT buyers should build up a new stack, change the way that you're doing software development, really go through all of the cost and the trouble of improving how you're doing things. This is like 2014, 2015, we would use, all the tech companies, your Teslas and Airbnbs and things like that and Netflix as motivators of companies that are coming to steal your business from you. So you've got to change and respond to them. What powers do they have? Their power is driven by a nimble, agile business model, which is driven by their ability to do product-based software well, to kind of use software as their primary way of doing business, and also their ability to scale, technically up to the big demands that customers have. Now, there's a whole lot of other stuff, including, when you bring in other companies, which shall remain nameless, sort of like figuring out the edges of legality to operate in and kind of innovating the regulatory landscape, as it were. Anyhow, but, for example, there's been we used to use that, and those things were true. But I think to the credit of a lot of existing companies that we would talk with, and a lot of companies did catch up. And this was the success of what we had at Pivotal and our competitors and other places, as many other companies did realize that they can improve the way that they were doing software and also have a bigger attention on innovating and improving the way that they did their business, which is great. And so that died down a little bit more, and more of what people are interested in is how do we take the capabilities and the competitive advantages that we have and do even better with them? Never mind competing with tech companies, which are always a threat, but we now kind of have internalized and understand that. And I think I was seeing this again recently where in the States, in the United States, this is a fun little thing. People who live in the United States never say the States. They don't say like, oh, I love living in the States. It's only people outside of the United States who say states. And, you know, when Americans like myself go abroad, we get all fancy pants. And I don't know, I even say toilet now instead of bathroom because I've been here about 2.5 years in Amsterdam. Have you ever noticed that I always mention that? I always figure out an excuse to say I live in Amsterdam. What are you going to do? But just like people, Americans abroad will say toilet. They also start saying states, but Americans never say states when they're in the States. They pretty much say America. They might say U.S., but that doesn't really happen much. They just say America. Anyhow, back in America, or the States, Amazon recently entered the mail delivery pharmaceutical business, right? And that's a pretty big threat if you're in the pharmaceutical business, like CVS and Walgreens and other things like that. And I guess if you're in the rest of the world, I think Boots and Walgreens still have a thing together. But if you're, pharmacies in the rest of the world, you're hopefully you're monitoring that very closely because Amazon and other people who have this ability would spread into that area. Now, I think, even the way that it's done here in the Netherlands, it's kind of more efficient. And it sort of feels the same as a customer, but there's a tremendous amount of inefficiencies, I think largely driven by regulatory things back in the States and the way that, medicine distribution is done. So it would be interesting. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how someone like Amazon, the kind of innovations they figure out, right? But that's a good example of this new threat comes along. Someone like Amazon is going to figure out how to break things up. Not break things up, how to kind of innovate things and do a little bit different things in there. And as a incumbent, an existing person, like it would kind of be nicer if you did that, right? If you had this sense of urgency that you should always evolve more and come up with new ways of doing things, instead of just sort of reaping profits as it will. So I think that's like the kind of thing you want to instill, especially as you're kind of putting in place the culture that you have. And it's, I don't really have a positive way of putting it. I think it would be nice to come up with that. It'd be nice if some of y'all out there, you can leave that in the comments, as it were, but a positive version of this urgency. But there's two things, two stories and ways of putting it from the tech world. And one of them, of course, is the old Andy Grove thing of essentially only the paranoid survive, right? Which, again, is a very negative way of looking at it, that you've got to be paranoid about people coming to take your business away. So you're always searching for that and always thinking about how to defend yourself against that. Now, there's another CEO. I was at an event where you get like your top customers and you have like a day-long event and then a nice dinner, all that kind of stuff. And the way that CEO put it is that you always want to have this sense of running in the yellow. And what they meant by that are the 3 status colors, right? You don't want to have a run in the red all the time where you're sort of in crisis mode and you're running around, as we like to say back in the States, like a chicken with your head cut off, right? So that's stressful. I mean, you want to be in the red when it's actually red. But then you also don't want to be in the green. I'm doing this. You don't want to be in the green where everything's cool and you can just coast. So you want to be in this yellow level where you've got that sense of urgency going there. Now, maybe a positive way of putting it, there's another section in this in the book that I have where I go over this idea that one of the things you want your corporate strategy group to start doing is using this closeness with your customer that software can bring you, right? So if you remember, when you switch over to the way that you're doing software, you get more intimacy with your customer, the users, if it's an internal facing thing, or whatever, if you're government, whatever you want to call the people who are using your software. But if you're deploying on a weekly cycle, if not more, you are observing what these people are doing more. And you can see the example of the mayonnaise video, if you recall that, where the developers doing kitchen software went in and at 4 a.m. in the morning and actually observed what people are doing. But you have a much greater sense of what your customers, your users, people are doing with your software, with your business. And that might be another thing. A form of this urgency is if you get your corporate strategy group, instead of just reading a bunch of PDFs and getting the annual sort of consult with the big management consulting firms, where they send in the army of recent college graduates and the partner with the very starchy, nice looking outfit, and they go and interview everyone in there, and they do a little bit of market study, and then they present you with some finding of the new things happening in your market and their recommendations. Instead, I mean, if you have the budget for doing that, it's fun to see what people come up with. And, we got to make sure the management consulting world continues to be funding, vital part of corporate functioning. But this corporate strategy group could spend some time in that cycle of actually observing what users are doing and people are doing. And I think you'll get a much richer source of information about what the market, what people are up to in the market. And that could be a type of urgency where you're continually curious and searching out what the jobs to be done are, what people need, what alternatives are people doing. So maybe curiosity is the positive version of urgency, right? A curiosity to not only see what's happening, but a real interest in helping solve problems and coming up with new things there. So that's something that, especially as you're transforming, and especially if you're a manager or a leader, think about whether you want to think about it in a positive, or urgency is not negative, but that kind of harried type of notion. How do you get that to become not only part of what you're doing this year, but to be part of the ongoing thing, the continuous improvement, the learning, and being curious about how things are going? Well, as always, if you're interested in digging into more of this, this time I'm just going to have the one CTA. If you go to tanzutalk.com, you can see all sorts of free offerings we have for training about Kubernetes, and looking into developer resources, and even booking some office hours. Speaking of consulting, to kind of start kicking off your application modernization and things like that. But this is based on something, like I said, from my most recent book, The Business Bottleneck. Now, the premise of this book is a little bit of like, if we get better at, it's not a little bit, this is what it is. If we get better at doing software, the business side needs to catch up and take advantage of that ability to do software better, that ability to get more richer information about what people, our customers, are doing, and really take advantage of the way of doing software, where we get our software out weekly and we're product managing it. And we have this much more detailed, closer study of the customers. And it kind of goes over my suggestion for what business people could do, from strategy to finance to just sort of leadership. And you can get a copy of that book for free if I've done it right. There'll be a little eye you can click on right up there, right there. And it'll be a link to download this book. And if you wait till the end of the video, there'll be a little thing you can click on as well. And you can always just go to tanzutalk.com and you can find the download for it there as well. So with that, we'll see everyone tomorrow. Bye-bye.